Hello, my beloved socios. Okay, this is a first. After 2.5 seasons, we finally got a Knight of the Realm on the show. So, please be upstanding for Sir Les Ferdinand. If you watched football in the 90s, you'll have special memories of Les Ferdinand for QPR and Newcastle in particular. He was a hugely popular striker, powerful, quick, supreme in the air, particularly for his height. He's now back at QPR, which was his first professional club, as director of football. Les has been one of our most valuable voices in the ongoing process, vital process, of eliminating racism from our sport and from our society. So, get ready to hear Sir Les on all of these subjects and also on helicopters, of course. You're going to love that. Well, at least I did. But let's start in Turkey. How many of you know that it was in Istanbul where Sir Les first made his name and won his first trophy, gloriously, against the man I most hate in all of football? I can fully understand, having watched you play and having talked to you while I worked in London, why they call you Sir Les, but we're with Sir Les Ferdinand, which is very exciting indeed, and we're in your majestic office where you can see your domain out the window. Yes. And it's a beautiful London day. This is kind of your manor. This is back to, well, this is where Les Ferdinand should be at QPR.
Yeah. We say my manor. This is my club in terms of, you know, where it all started for me. In terms of my manor's Ladbroke Grove. I grew up in sort of like West London, Notting Hill. And although this is the west side, it's not quite as...
It's the leafy countryside sort of thing,
countryside, right?
As you go from here back into town, there's a little bit of wild land where they've got ponies and horses and stuff like that nobody's ever developed on.
That's right, yeah.
Which I absolutely love. Yeah, that's so London to me.
I think it's green belts and no one can develop on it. So you always see that going in, and then after that, once you go past that, then you realise you're into London because there's not too much greenery until you go to the parks.
This Arlington is featured in our podcast so much. We've done so many Chelsea players, and when I was a reporter in London, you'd come out here and nobody could hear each other. Your high ball might hit a jumbo jet, all that kind of stuff. Have you diverted the flight path or anything like that, or is it still kind of like it was, a wee bit windy?
Yeah, it's a wee bit like it was. We've improved the pitches, but unfortunately we've not been able to improve the quality of the sound, so every now and again you'll hear a jumbo going over and we might have to stop this for a little bit.
Well, listen,
and the building will shake as well.
What you'll hear is Les and I miming the parts that you can't hear because of the flight path. So, you'll have been asked this 1,000 times, but I can't hide the fact that... as somebody who moved abroad because of my love for Spanish football, and as somebody who's made it my business to be nosy to John Collins or Steve McManaman about what inspired them or what they learned abroad, I have to kind of rewind quite a long way to a moment when you're playing for this club or you've just begun to play for this club. And some people listening to this podcast, believe it or not, won't know. You kind of made your name in Turkey, briefly.
Yeah.
You went from London without probably too much Turkish, maybe some night class, I don't know, not knowing much about Turkey. Before you kind of say, well, it was an easy decision because there's when a young man who's brought up, who's barely touched professional football and is breaking through in London at the club that was nearest to him, not the club you support, gets told, do you want to go to Turkey? What the hell makes you say yes?
I think for me, I'd come into the side and I'd sort of been playing in men's football in non-league at Hayes. And I came into the reserves, and although you were playing with, you know, senior professionals, a lot of the time you were playing against apprentices. So I found it quite easy. I was scoring goals in the reserves. Hence, I got an early chance to make my debut. So I made my debut. I came off the bench at Coventry. I think I'd been at the club for about 3-4 weeks. And we went to Coventry, and it was the year in '87 when they won the FA Cup. So I joined the back end of the season. I think it was like 6-7 weeks to go. So I was able to make my debut against Coventry. We got beat 3-1. So like that was my sort of like first taste of it, and I was like, wow, I was in awe of it. I'm looking in Panini books and collecting stickers of players, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting in the changing room and we've got some of these players that I've been collecting. So like, you know, I always remember my first game. I had to take time off work. I was working and I was doing deliveries. I was working for a wallpaper shop, paints and wallpaper, and doing painting and decorating. And I had to take time off my job to play my first reserve game, which is against Southampton at the Old Dell. I always remember turning up at Queen's Park Rangers to get on the coach. So I dressed up, got there, and then the first person to greet me was Sammy Lee.
Whoa. Talk about panini stickers.
Yeah, exactly.
Sammy Lee, who's done everything for Liverpool and England.
Exactly.
And the greeting is like?
And he's come over and I get to the coach and he comes out and then he says, hi Les, how are you? Blah, and I'm thinking, he knows my name. He's called me Les. And he said, he's good luck and blah, blah, blah. It's a great career for you and this, that and the other. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. Because as you said, I'm looking at Sammy Lee. He's called me Les. And he's saying, come on, this is what you do. He brought me on the coach and, I sat down, got me a cup of tea and everything. And I'm thinking, this is Sammy Lee.
It's proper.
There was Clive Walker on the coach, Gary Chivers. There was Clive Walker, David, all these guys on
Chelsea
yeah,
Clive.
That's right, yeah.
Smashing Clive.
All these players on the coach who were at QPR at the time. We went down to the Dell and I always remember getting smashed by Jimmy Case. First 5 minutes of the game, just smashed me and I fell on the floor and he looked down at me and he went, welcome to professional football, young man. And then just ran off and I was like...
It's worth the smash just for the line. That's a good line.
And he said to me, welcome, and I thought, oh, okay.
Sammy and Jimmy might have had some... They'd have been teammates.
Yeah, they would have been teammates.
Sammy wouldn't like to be losing to Southampton, I'd guess.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of went down and like I said, it was my first reserve game and I was so in awe of it, I don't even remember it. Do you know what I mean? It was I was just so in awe of everything around me and everything that was going on. That was the one part of the game I remember, getting smashed by Jimmy Case and him saying, welcome to professional football. Like I said, there was 6 weeks to go. I came on against Coventry, we got beat 3-1. I came on against Sheffield Wednesday, we were 5-1 down when I came on. And then sort of like we had the summer break and it was like being back at school again, so like you get 6 weeks off and stuff, and we did that. And then I came back pre-season. And it was obviously the first pre-season I'd ever done in professional.
Your manager's Jim Smith at this stage, isn't he?
Yeah, sorry, Jim Smith was a
big character.
Yeah, and it was Peter Shreves around, Frank Sibley was here. So we came back, did the first pre-season, and we used to train at a place up in just on the A40 there called just behind Viking Sports. It used to be along the Barclays Bank. And I did my first sort of like few days, and back then you used to go out, and it's not like it is now. You do everything with the ball. Like you went out, and we ran up and we ran to this hill, and I looked at the hill and I thought, have we got to go up there? Yeah, we got to go up. And not only have you got to go up, you got to come back down, and you got to go out again, and then you got to come back down, and you got to go over again. And
get out of here.
So it was
and no oxygen, no sharpness,
nothing, and it was sort of like my first pre-season. So after a few days, I came in one day, and the physio said to me, "How are you feeling?" Because I'd seen him doing some work on the boys on their backs and stuff like that. And I said, "Yeah, I feel a bit stiff," and that was normal because I hadn't done professional pre-season before.
This was the first one. Okay.
Yeah, I'd done non-league sort of like pre-seasons, but this was my first professional pre-season. So anyway, he clonked my back. He did some work and he manipulated my back. And 2 days later, I couldn't get out of bed. I was stuck, couldn't move, I couldn't get out of bed. And so we called him up and said, I can't move. So anyway, they got someone in, a guy called Ron Johnson, who rectified everything. But for the rest of that season, problems. It's like whether it was my hamstrings, whether it was, I just kept having problems. And so that first season was a real problem for me. Yeah. And we put it down, everyone put it down to the fact it was my first pre-season and my first getting used to. And then this opportunity came around during that season. I was still playing some reserve games, but I never really got close to being part of the first team again. Travelled a couple of times, but was never really part of it. It was only 2 substitutes back then as well. So I remember Jim Smith speaking to me and saying, I think you've got a real chance. He said, but, obviously I'm not able to play you and blah, 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 blah. My friend out in Turkey, Gordon Mill, he's coaching the team out there. And he said he needs a centre forward. And I've told him that, you might be the answer. And he said, and I think it'll give you a great opportunity to go away and see whether you can be the centre forward we think you can be. So at the beginning, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah. Just kind of like batted it off, and I just said, yeah. I'm thinking, I ain't never going to Turkey in the back of my head, All right?
Kind of what I thought you might have been
thinking. I think that would have been a normal reaction, do you know what I mean? If you said to me, you're going down the road to Brentford or you're going to go to blah, blah, you might have understood it, but I was going to Turkey. And as you said, I knew very little about Turkey. So he mentioned it to me again, probably 3 weeks later. He mentioned the same thing again. And then he said to me, Gordon Mill was coming over. He was going to come and watch training and stuff like that.
Had you heard of Gordon from his Leicester Coventry days? Not
at the
really.
time, I've got to be honest, I hadn't.
Yeah, okay.
I did some research on it, and as you said, played with Liverpool and everything else. And he said Gordon Mill was coming over around about the Christmas time, when sort of like out in Turkey they have a break,
A small break, yeah.
So he said, Gordon's going to come over and he's going to come watch training and stuff and have a look at it. So he came over, watched training, and then I kind of like dismissed it after that. I thought, I'm never going to do it. And I thought, I'm going to do the courteous thing and I meet Gordon, have a chat with him. And I did. I sat down in the Hilton Hotel in Kensington.
I know exactly.
In Holland Park, just on the corner.
Yeah.
And I sat there with Gordon. He was staying there, and we had a chat. And he was saying, "Look, son," he said, "I've watched you in training and all that." And he said, "I think you got a real chance." And he said, kind of like sold Besiktas to me and Turkey, and left and kind of like shook hands with him and said, "Yeah, I think I'll do it." And then I went home and I went, "Mum, I don't know if I've done the right thing here. I've shaken hands with someone that I'm going to go to Turkey."
To you, that meant something. I mean, I'm not being rude, because I like that, and I loved when you said, "I'll do the courteous thing."
Yeah.
One, I think that's a good upbringing. Two, I think there was a certain kind of London code about slightly old-fashioned traditional things. I did a traditional thing, but a handshake was quite an important thing, right or wrong.
Yeah. If I shake my hands with you about something, and I say I'm going to do it, that's it, it's done.
That's what I thought. And like so that, love that.
I'd shaken hands with Gordon and I said, "Mum, I'm not sure if I've done the right thing. I've shaken hands with Gordon Mill and said to him, I'm going to come to Turkey." And she's gone, "What?" Because I hadn't really said anything to her, I didn't even mention it. When Jim Smith mentioned it to me, I didn't even mention it. And I kind of like, in that space of time of going from the Hilton Hotel, and I think it's well published now, that I lived on the Lancaster West Estate, right where the Grenfell Towers were.
Yeah.
So from the Hilton Hotel to the Grenfell Towers is probably a 10-minute walk. Yeah. But I was driving, so it's a couple of minutes. But in the time of me driving from sort of like the hotel back to my home, I thought, I kind of like gave myself, what's the worst case scenario here? And I said, well, the worst case scenario is I can go there, absolutely hate it, jump on a plane and come back, and although they'll hold my registration, I'll just have to sit here and not play football for a year. And I said, but that was the worst case scenario.
Still clear vision.
Yeah.
It's still quite organised thinking. Because if you part that worst case, everything after that is better, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying it. So that's the worst case scenario for me. But then I could go there and absolutely love it and do well. So I thought, coming in. So even on the day that I left to go to Gordon was still over here.
Your mum comes round to the idea.
Yeah, my mum says, "Look, listen, son, you got to do whatever you think's right. And if things are not progressing in the way that you want at QPR, if you think this will benefit you," and at the same time, I had a few chats with my dad, and he was like, "Listen, son, you've gone into professional football, but you're still living the same life." And I was still running around with my mates, because I didn't want my mates to think that I'd changed in any way, shape or form because I become a professional footballer. I come from that kind of like that upbringing and that background is like, you don't really change. You just stay the way you are. You keep your same friends and so on and so forth. And so I probably went over the top trying to prove to my friends that I hadn't changed when I really needed to change.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I really needed to change. But at the time I was 19, so I didn't really know no better. I just had a little boy as well, so that was a big decision for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To move over there, and
is Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron. Yeah.
Gee whiz,
So we
this is a big decision.
Yeah. So I spoke to Angela, who's Aaron's mum, and said, "Look, this opportunity." She goes, "You've got to do it." She goes, "Look, we can come over and see you and this, that, and I'll bring Aaron and no problem." She was like, "Okay." So I made the decision I was going. So I remember coming out my front door with my suitcases in my hand. I looked at them and went, "Where am I going?" Because, like I said, the only thing I knew about Turkey at that time was the film Midnight Express, and that's not the best advert for
necessarily. No, not really.
So in 1989, I got my suitcases and I'm heading to Turkey. So we get on a plane and Gordon, I'm sitting next to Gordon, and he's going, "Oh, son, I think you'll have a great time. I've lived out here for a few years now, and they're great people. It's a great club. You'll get looked after." So he kind of like gave me some do's and don'ts of what to do and what not to do. In terms of like, he said, "Look, there'll be times where you're due your money." He said, "You get paid a little bit differently over there. There'll be times where you might be
slow, I presume."
Yeah, exactly. And he says, your money might be due on Friday, but you'll get it the following Friday. But you will get it, so don't react." And he said, "We've had a few that in the past, some of our players have gone, 'Well, no, I'm not training,' and they just get rid of them." So I was like, okay. So anyway, went out there, and as we landed, we get to the airport, and you go to the carousel to get your luggage. Before I get to the carousel, there's like loads of photographers and taking pictures and all that, and I'm thinking, it must be here for Gordon, because Gordon's doing well, and they're taking pictures of me, and I'm going, God, I've just come out of reserves at QPR, did they realise that? He went, no, son, it'll be all right. I go outside, we get outside the customs, and we go outside, and you got Besiktas supporters standing there hoisting me on their shoulders, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've only ever played in reserves, I ain't even really played in the first team.
I've been playing much better than I realised. Boy, I'm good. That's incredible. Because for younger listeners, hello, ageism here, no internet.
No.
No beaming live games from, Brentford or QPR reserves over to Turkey. They've gone out and said, with this hero is coming, they must have gone and searched that information. I don't know how.
What I do now understand is, and I suppose I understood at the time after I'd got there, was that English football was held in such high regard in Turkey at the time that they thought anyone coming from the English league to play in their league was like...
This is because Forest and Liverpool dominating the European Cup, and the England team quite exciting under Greenwood. That's a couple of years before, I suppose.
Yeah, it was, but I suppose at the time, you still are. Our football was probably the most competitive football that was about, so that was probably the reason why there was all this furore around this. But I remember getting in the car and going to a hotel. And, it might be the same in Spain as well, I think it is, that the offices are never at the stadium, not like here in England, So we went to a hotel, which was just up the road from Besiktas' offices. So I was staying there overnight, and I think I was there one night, and the next day we was going to Germany pre-season. So get to the hotel and sit there relaxing, and then Gordon says to me, listen, Les, what we're going to do, I'm going to have a training session this afternoon. I've asked them to put on a training session so that I can introduce you to the lads before we actually go to Germany, so you can meet the players. He says something that we do every year, really. It's just a bit of a few fans come and see what players we've signed in the close season, And I said, okay, all right, yeah, no problem. So anyway, we relax for like a couple of hours, and he said, well, off we go. So anyway, we get in the car, and I'm getting closer to the stadium. And I could hear this noise coming out the stadium. And I'm saying, God, you said there was like a couple of people coming to training. So what's training? He said, yeah, there's a few people. Couldn't believe it, 35,000 people. The stadium was absolutely packed, jam-packed, right? And he said, yeah, that's what he said. Well, what we do, we unveil all the signings that we've made in the close season in this training session. So I was like, okay. So anyway, we'll never forget it. We're in the tunnel, and they used to have one of these tunnels where you go down, you come up the stairs, and you go out onto the pitch. And we're in the tunnel, and I've kind of met all the players in the changing room. A lot of them couldn't speak English. There was a couple of boys that had gone to university, so they could speak English. So communicate with them, and they introduced me to everybody, and we had an interpreter there. So anyway, when we was going out, they said, look, there's you. I sort of like tried to get in, just filter in with one of the players, and they kept pulling me out and getting me to the back, pulling me out, getting me out. Every time I tried, maybe they won't notice me or something. Every time I tried to filter in, they kept pulling me out and going, no. You're the man. Last. You're going last. So all these players have gone out, and I come up, and this big cheer comes up, and everyone's screaming and shouting, and they give me a dove, right? Old fella runs over, gives me a dove, and he says, when you get to the centre circle, you let the dove go.
Nobody's warned you this is going to happen.
No one warned.
Some old geezer runs up and gives you a dove.
But first of all, before I came out, I forgot this part. I came out, and what they do, they slaughter a sheep before the start. It's one of their rituals.
Okay.
And so they took me over to where the sheep was lying, and they take, someone dabs their finger in the blood of the sheep, and they did the sign of the cross on my forehead and on my boots. And then the geezer gave me the dove, and she'd go to the centre. So I don't know, none of this is happening.
You're just sort of playing along.
Yeah, playing along. So again,
it's a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. So I go to the centre circle, and I throw the dove up. So I throw the dove up, and all of a sudden, dove, I think, that's not flying away. It's actually coming back down again. So the dove comes down, hits the deck, bang. And everything in the stadium goes silent. It was like a movie.
No way.
Everything goes silent. Right. So I throw it up, and I throw it up even higher, thinking, come on, dove, go.
Get me out of this one, please.
Coming back down again, hits the deck. Right, and I'm thinking, that's it, I'm finished. I've only been here now a couple of hours, I'm finished. I've got to go back. Right, and then this old fella runs up and he pulls the wings apart a little bit, and he says, now.
To open them a bit?
Yeah, he opens the wings a little bit. And so anyway, he gives it back to me and I fry it up and this thing flies off and everyone's like that. I was thinking, cool, for 15 minutes, for 10 minutes. I thought I was a goner. Like, I didn't even think I was getting out of the stadium.
I hope you told everybody afterwards, I knew I was doing it. Just a little trick we do at home in England, And just like for the Humane Society, no doves were hurt in the making of this podcast. Just so we're clear.
Sure. Yeah. So that was my first sort of like taste of what Turkey and Besiktas was all about. We went off to Germany the next day as normal pre-season, played in my first game, scored, and kind of went on from there. So I had a good pre-season. We then came back, played in a thing called the President's Cup, which was played between Fenerbahce, Galatasaray and Besiktas.
Wow, the three big rivals there.
Yeah, so it's good, and that's at the start of the season. It's called the President's Cup, and it's only between those three teams. Yeah, so I scored against Galatasaray, I scored against Fenerbahce in my first game, and that was it. Like,
never mind the dove, you're in now.
Yeah,
you score against Gala and Fener and you're in, right?
Yeah.
How was that responded to?
I mean, the obviously the supporters were going wild, and it's like you turn up somewhere and they say, right, these are the local rivals, it's Galatasaray and Fenerbahce, but the other team on the other side of Asia, because you cross the Bosphorus to go over the other side of Asia. And so you've got the European side and you've got the Asian side of
Istanbul.
Fenerbahce was on the Asian side. So anyway, they it was their biggest rivals, and they'd signed Tony Schumacher, the goalkeeper.
I've never forgiven him for the 82 World Cup. Regular listeners know what I think of Tony Schumacher.
So I scored against him.
Come on.
So that was.
So this is the President's Cup you scored against him?
I scored. Yes, that's my first game against Fenerbahce. Anyway, we end up winning the President's Cup. So it's a good start to the season. We got off to a great start, and we won majority of the games with it. And I ended up scoring. I think it was. I played 33 games in all with Cup and League and scored 21 goals.
Which is sensational form, and it takes you away from a year injured and maybe reserves and on the brink of QPR. But how are you living? I'm genuinely interested in you don't understand a word, right? Yeah. So everybody now who travels carries, I don't know, iPads, DVDs. We're all listening to different sounds, hopefully podcasts. Mm-hmm. None of that is there for you.
No.
You don't have family or a loved one there with you all the time. No language, the culture's hugely different. You've already said that this city in which you live, is formed by two continents meeting. Yeah. Was it overwhelming? We were talking recently about Terry Gibson did one of these interviews and he said Aussie, a World Cup winner, and Ricky Villa arrived at Spurs, they trained and they're packed off into their, Ford Cortina and set off. Nobody telling them where to go, how to get back the next day. They couldn't speak English. So how were you, in order to give you a platform to score 21 and 33, what was life like for a 22-year-old Ladbroke Grove guy in Istanbul? How did you survive?
The one thing I did was I said, I can't go to Turkey and say, that's not like England, that's not like London, that's not like London. What I had to do was immerse myself in what Turkish life was all about.
Wow.
And I'd thought that before I'd gone over, I thought, look, if I'm going there, I've got to accept what Turkey is. And to my surprise, it was absolutely fantastic. Of course, I missed my family and stuff like that, my son, but I didn't pine for anything. I thought this is an opportunity for me to come and concentrate on football 150%, no distractions, nothing else. I lived in a hotel for about 6 weeks and then I was like, no, I need to get a flat, I just need a bit of space. And so the club were absolutely fantastic with me. They couldn't have been any better. They couldn't have helped me in any more than what they did. And I was fortunate because I had a Serbian goalkeeper. His name was Radi Zalad, and he spoke English really well. Perfect. His wife was an English teacher at school, so that helped me. And then there was another friend of mine. He was like one of the managers at the hotel at the Hilton where I stayed, and he became a really good friend of mine. He's no longer alive, unfortunately. He took his life, but he became a really good friend of mine. And he was a massive sort of like, he loved the football club. He was like, so he would do anything for the football club for it to benefit. And so those two people had a real big effect on me being able to settle into life in Turkey in Besiktas.
What are the sights and sounds and the colours and the noises and the food? And as a footballer, you maybe don't have a lot of time, but was it inspirational? Was it confusing? What did you learn? Did you hear the call to prayer? I've recently been out in Qatar. I grew up in Scotland. You don't hear. You hear that, you start to pay attention to it. At first, it's a little bit unusual, and then you go, "Wow, that's really hypnotic." But were there things about life in Istanbul that stick with you? Sounds or smells?
I think the biggest thing for me that I recognise and pretty quickly was, I think anywhere you go in life, any country you go to, there's a line between wealth and poverty. And I felt that the line between wealth and poverty in Istanbul was very extreme to what I'd seen anywhere else in the world. And that was the one thing that captured me. But, the other thing was that everybody supported the football team. So wherever you go, and in Istanbul, I stood out like a bit of a sore thumb, really. Do you know what I mean? So everywhere I went, everyone was 30, and
the Gala guys and the Fener guys, did you feel okay with them?
They was absolutely fantastic with me. And I think the reason I ended up being quite successful there was the simple fact that, like I said, I immersed myself, and even with my teammates, I tried to show them that I wanted to learn Turkish rather than me speak English all the time. But they accepted. They wanted to learn. They were doing
their turn as well.
No, we don't want you to learn Turkish. We want to learn English, So I had some good teammates and looked after me really well.
Before we finish on this with the cup final, why are you like that? I've grown up all my life with it's very rare that a British footballer is even willing to consider the risk. And all right, now there are sums of money here, but let's put the current Premier League boom to one side. As a nation, Scotland, England and Wales, it's the minority who would take that kind of chance, and then secondly would go, on top of that, I know how I'm going to handle this and be open to the culture. Why are you different? Who formed you like that and made you adventurous? And why the hell aren't more people in our islands like that?
It's funny because, unfortunately, my mum's not alive anymore, but obviously speaking to my dad's sort of like, he's probably not as adventurous. My dad, every year, go on holiday back to St Lucia, where he came from, so he wouldn't go anywhere else. Whereas I go all over the world, and this, this football thing has put me in a fortunate position where I could do that. But I think back there, it's something innate in you. It's very difficult to put your finger on why you're like that, why I did what I did. Even now, I you ask me the questions, and I'm thinking, why did I do that? Why did I? But it's just how I felt at the time, and I just saw it as an opportunity. I wanted to be a professional footballer, and I saw it as an opportunity to give myself a year of just total football to concentrate about. Forget all my mates here, forget everything to do with life here in England and London. It was about me going somewhere and trying to realise the potential that I felt I had.
Do me and Patrick Battistone a favour and build up to the cup final by I haven't seen the semi-final goal, but you score in the semi-final of the Turkish Cup, right?
It's the actual final I scored in.
But you didn't score in the semi. I think you'll find you scored in the semi-final as well.
I probably did.
And then, now listen, we didn't rehearse that. That's why you Sir Les. So you did, it's a matter of fact, you did score, and away from home too in the semi-final. And it's a two-legged final.
Yeah.
And the first leg is at Fenerbahce. So, I don't know, probably no pressure, no big deal. To try and set the scene and tell us about the goal, because I have seen the goal at the time and recently. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
What's the scene?
The scene is we turn up to Fenerbahce knowing that this is a two-legged final. And there'd been a lot of stuff going on in the press because they had what they deemed to be a hard man called Nezi playing for Fenerbahce, and we'd had quite a few run-ins throughout the season.
We meaning you and him?
Yeah, me and him had quite a few run-ins during the season in terms of tackles, and because I'd come from English football, I was aggressive, I was strong, I was powerful, but he was the one that was going to tame me because he was the hard man of Turkish football. So we'd had a few battles throughout the season, to be honest. And
fun?
Yeah, fun, yeah.
But you relished it?
Yeah, relished it. I thought, if he got the better of me in one game, I was making sure I got the better of him in another game and stuff like that. And then going into the final, always remember the press saying that Nezi was one of those that would go over the top, and some of the tackles that he's put on me has been out of order and blah, 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 and the referee has to be tough in this game. And always remember, I think it was my first turn and run with the ball, and he came from nowhere and took me out, and the referee booked him. It was less than 5 minutes into the game. So the referee booked him, and you know, thinking back on what the papers had said, he obviously acted on the fact that, you know, he had no chance of getting the ball and just...
First tackles and them days weren't bookings, right? Am I right? I mean, for those who don't remember that time, I'm being fair, am I?
Yeah, no, without a shadow.
You had one for free, didn't you?
Yeah.
At least.
And even you probably had more than one, because it wasn't until I came back to the UK and started playing on a regular basis that the one tackle from behind rule came in, where a referee would go. I remember playing against Tony Adams once at Loftus Road, and he come through the back of me. I remember the referee went, "Right, Tony, that's your one."
And you got the FIFA rules, and that wasn't written in the rules. Like, it's first tackle, but there's a one.
Yeah.
You know, there's one, and then
I'll never forget it. And he turned around, he went, "Right, Baldy, I've had my one. It's your turn next." You know what I mean? And that was it back then. You know, because before then you could go through the back and through the back and through the back of players, and this guy, he'd come out of nowhere, and I'd knock the ball past him, and he'd taken me out, and the referee just booked him straight away.
as you're lying there in the ground, you see the yellow card, you go, "Oh, you beauty!"
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I've got him on toast here now.
Exactly. So there was like, you know, any game between Besiktas and Fenerbahce is always a well-supported affair, and, you know, I remember our supporters in the distance over there, and the game had gone on, it was a bit up and down and stuff like that, and then the ball came into me sort of like probably must have been about 30 yards out, something like that, and I remember turning, Nezzy was up my back, turning.
Your first touch is lovely. It sticks, and it's glue.
And then I turn him, and then I sort of like get on a bit of a run, sort of like heading towards the box, and I go between a couple of players, and then as I go to shoot, I'd sort of like dummy, and sort of like Schumacher goes down.
But there's a little dive from one of the defenders.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're showing this way, and as he dives, it's just like, seeing it coming, lad. You pull it left,
exactly,
and then it's you and Tony Schumacher. And before the game, there's a big friendly. There's been no animosity between you two. He comes looking for you.
That's right,
I don't know if maybe beneath it. Oh, please don't rob me of my. How many years is since my 40-year hatred? I was at that World Cup, and I just still think it's a crime.
Yeah.
But like, he'd obviously taken a shine to you. So is it one-on-one? You're not even thinking that it's Schumacher. You just it's all instinct. Is it?
As I've done what I've done, I'm thinking, right, okay, the icing on the cake is this ball being in the back of the net, and it didn't matter. You know, at that time, you don't even think about who the goalkeeper is. You've just got in your mind what you're going to do now. And as I've cut back inside, and he's come out, I'm thinking outside the boot, and it goes in the bottom corner here, and this is exactly what happened. And it wasn't till afterwards, you know, all the players come and they jump on me and they go, "Oh, you God, what a goal!" We ended up winning that 1-0, and then it was 0-0 in the replay. So we ended up winning sort of like 1-0 and winning the cup. So yeah, special moment. And as I said, I'd had a couple of battles with Schumacher as well. You know, some of the balls in the air where he sometimes. Other players wouldn't go for it. I went for it, and we had a couple of clashes.
Now we're getting to it.
So
he's still a bad bugger.
There was.
I never forgive.
There was a bit of respect, I suppose.
Coming home after that must have been, you know, fabulous. The legend is that there was some petition to the government that used to say, I mean, what was this?
Yeah. So in Turkish football and in some other countries in the world as well, because like you've been fortunate to be part of the Spanish team when they've won things, and you get the king in the dressing room after they've won the World Cup. So in Turkish football, when you play a cup final, the president will come to the game. When we won the cup final, after the game show, we went for dinner, and the president turned up for dinner with the winning team. And then the owner of the football club at the time, they call him the Bashkan, who's the chairman, and his name was Suleiman Sabah. He was complaining to the president that they wanted to keep me for another year, and QPR wasn't being forthcoming and allowing this to happen. So he said, "No problem, I'll write to." So he wrote to Margaret Thatcher.
He genuinely did.
He genuinely wrote to Margaret Thatcher, saying that they want to keep me for another year. And he thinks she should intervene and speak to Queen's Park Rangers.
He's showing a rudimentary grasp. Maybe he thought she was a season ticket holder, kind of off the straw or something like that. How bizarre.
I know, it was. When they showed me the letter, I was like, because when I'd heard it and I'd like thought, no, this is what they actually showed me the letter that was sent, like, you know. So they tried to do that.
Was it Jim Gregory at the time?
Jim Gregory would have been the chairman.
That's a match between Jim Gregory and Margaret Thatcher going 5 rounds. I don't know who to come out and talk to.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I came back. In the meantime, Jim Smith had left QPR and gone on to manage Newcastle. Trevor Francis had taken over as the manager here at the club, and so what I did was at one stage myself and Gordon came back in that same Christmas period that he came over to see me. While I was over that same Christmas period, we flew back, spoke to Trevor about could I stay for another year, and at the time Trevor asked could the club pay a transfer fee? So Gordon was saying, over in Turkey, they don't pay transfer fees. It's usually player goes for free at the end of the season. So Trevor was going, the only way we could do it is if you could pay a transfer fee of about $500,000. So Gordon was like, no, we can't do that. And I said, but look, I'd like to stay, because obviously if you're willing to sell me then you're not planning to use me money. And he went, no, well, the other side of the coin is I don't want to play next season. I'm in charge. I don't want to play next season. I am player manager, but I don't really want to play that much. So if there's someone scoring goals out, we've seen your record. If there's someone scoring goals out, maybe it would benefit us if we brought you back. So in the end, I ended up coming back.
It's interesting that you would have been at least interested in staying.
Yeah.
That's a big leap from what have I done, Midnight Express, to another year.
Yeah.
It shows like a brilliant attitude and brilliant talent too, because nobody should underestimate that. Not the risks that you were taking, but you were going out into the unknown.
Yeah.
I really hugely admire that. And I remember at the time being proud. So I always had a wanderlust myself, and therefore to see footballers who went abroad. Steve Archibald went to Barcelona. I was always fascinated by John Charles, who was before us, but was a legend in Italy, etc.
I must point out that Gordon Mill was an absolute fantastic, absolutely. I can't thank him enough. And a lot of the times you come back and you start talking, and people start talking about who've influenced your career. And obviously, because things kicked off for me when I got back here and Jerry Francis had taken over, there's a lot talked about Jerry Francis, but I don't think without Gordon Mill having been in my life and teaching me some of the stuff that he taught me, that I would have had the career
on and off the pitch, maybe.
Yeah, at both, because Gordon was out there with his wife Edith, and sometimes his boys used to come out to Istanbul, and he just made sure that I was all right the whole time I was there. He gave me the scope to just concentrate on football. He made sure that everything was done and everything was okay for me, so all I could do was concentrate on football. So he was a massive help for me in my career.
And he goes on, if I'm not wrong, I mean we'll come off Gordon, but I made a mistake in not asking about him, because he's been important to you, but my respect goes to him too, for he'd been out there before you. He'd taken these same risks, with the same sort of cultural shock waiting for him. And largely, although he moved to Japan, he then made his reputation even bigger, because he coaches at least 2 or 3 more times.
That's right,
in Turkish football, and successfully, and presumably is regarded as something of a legend there. In fact, does he also coach Fenerbahce? He moves. He doesn't just work at Besiktas. But for an Englishman to coach a couple of clubs and become, I think, at one stage a director of football too, it speaks about real quality.
Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic out there, and they revered him. He brought something. What I didn't realise is at the time of going, I was the first British player to ever go out and play in Turkey.
No, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I was the first British player to ever go and play in Turkey, and I'm not sure if Gordon was the first manager, but I know certainly was the first British player. They held him in such high esteem, because not only was he a good manager, but the way he conducted himself as well. And I think he was pretty much like all the things I'm talking about. He immersed himself in Turkish life, and people would see him about the place. Like myself, I'd take myself to the Grand Bazaar and go and look at all the different bits and pieces that I had to look at. And Gordon did the same. So we never sort of cut ourselves off from anybody.
Sensational. I love hearing these words, because it's been a credo of mine all my life that I can't understand, or at least for those who have talent in sport who won't even sample the foreign life. They're cutting themselves off from a really enriching experience. Could go well, could go badly. That's in the lap of the gods. But it's something that they should experiment with. And there's something in our makeup here, like so few in Britain are willing to try a foreign language because they're a little bit scared of embarrassment. We're supposed to be a kind of warrior nation. We're kind of quite. There's a fear of embarrassment almost. And risk, I think. And footballers now, to this day, are saying, England's good for me, that's fine. It's a shame about that. You come back, and it's a necessary change of tone, because no matter when this goes out, we're sitting here a couple of days after Cyril Regis died. And the reason for raising that is that, just by a real amazing coincidence, when you make your debut at Highfield Road against that Coventry side, Cyril's playing on the other side and scoring. And you're a tremendously articulate man and also bright. And I want you to try and sum up, for those listening who don't know Cyril, 2 things. The footballer, what made him special? Because for me, he was also special. At West Brom side that I watched, when football was rare on television, and you were therefore doubly impacted by what you saw on muddy pitches, with maybe, Ali Brown, Ali Robertson, Statham, Batson, Laurie Cunningham. Let's talk about Cyril, the footballer, but you've talked before, this is nothing new, but I think it is important. But how important it is for how much of a guidance it is to see black men in English football succeeding and being venerated and showing a way. These two things, I think, at a time of Cyril passing, are important to try and draw out in your words.
Well, maybe you should talk about the person first and foremost, because I think that's more important. I've been in the game for 30 odd years now, and I think the measure of Cyril Regis is that in those 30 odd years, I've never heard a person say a bad word about him. So as a man, and considering what he went through as a football player, he, for me, at the time of when I was growing up, there wasn't many black players that I used to see on the TV. There was a smidgen of black players that we heard about that played every now and again. They used maybe in the reserves, played occasionally, was on the bench, may have come on. But the era of Cyril Regis, the late Laurie Cunningham, or I should say the late Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham and Brendan Batson, and I remember George Berry being at Wolves at the time.
Big central defender, right?
Yeah, these were the first guys that I saw playing on a regular basis, week in, week out. And it was the first time in my life I was able to look at something and say, football, and go, wow, that's perhaps something that I could do. Up until then, I never ever thought that I could be a professional footballer.
Genuinely,
honestly. And you get boys who grew up saying, from the day I was whatever I thought was going to be a professional footballer, or wanted to be a professional footballer. But because it was an industry that I didn't think was available to me, it's very difficult to turn around and go, well, that's what I want to do, because I just didn't think it was available to me. But until I saw those guys play for West Brom and play on a regular basis, it was the first time I ever thought, wow, there might be an opportunity to be a professional footballer here.
Just by seeing it, never mind their excellence, by seeing it, it told you that's something that I can aim at. Yeah, simple as that.
You can aspire to, because until then, my parents would never let me go to football. And I won't just put it down to...
Even at QPR?
Even at QPR. My parents would never ever let me go to a football game. My parents came to this country in the 60s when it was about skinheads and telly boys and all that. So my granddad and my uncles and all those people got into loads of fights just because they were black. Now, football was, back in that era, seen as a real hooligan.
Certainly in the 70s.
In the 70s,
sure,
around the globe, we were renowned for hooliganism in this country.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't even say it was a race thing. It was because of that hooligan element.
There was danger. There was danger, young kid.
And you used to see skinheads and so on and so forth. So my parents were like, "That's one place you ain't going, because we can't guarantee your safety."
They were right too. And so, having grown up in the same area as you,
exactly,
it was the truth.
Yeah. So I was never allowed to go to football. So again, it wasn't something that I could go to and aspire to. But once I started seeing on the likes of Laurie, Cyril and Brendan on a big match occasionally. And
there's another point, because not only, as you say, were there not many visible black footballers at the top end of English football, and it was dangerous, there wasn't a lot of coverage of football on television. So that, like any supply and demand and commodity thing, that if you reduce the supply, the demand and the magic of it goes up. Yeah. So what are you talking about? Maybe Saturday night match of the day, or what was your ritual to watch? More
the big match than
what is the big match?
The big match used to come on a Sunday.
Right.
Brian Moore used to be the presenter, and it would show a live game of some sort on a Sunday. So that was the one thing that you would see from time to time. And talking about seeing those guys and football not being an environment that I could go to, back then was the monkey chants, was the bananas being thrown on the pitch. So certainly your parents weren't going to say to you, "Yeah, go on, here you go, here's some money, you go and watch football, you'll be all right there." So it wasn't something I was allowed to go and watch or see. I had to be a fan from afar, from a distance. So those guys, I always remember Laurie going to Real Madrid, and the same sort of like corners that you're talking about, taken with the outside of his boot, and it was like, we was like, wow, look at Laurie.
How many times in a life spent watching football I've seen things where Messi now, Ronaldinho, occasionally. So often you go like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
And it thrills you. Your heart goes pitter-patter. And also you then want to try it. You want to dominate it. You're like, we were all like, and of course, I don't know what you could afford, but we had little, 10 pence footballs bought at the petrol station. Which already went like that. So if you kick like that, they probably went behind you.
And you're talking, and you're right, because you think about Cruyff and the Cruyff turn.
Yeah.
That was on a similar part when he started taking those corners. Everyone was mesmerised by it. How's he managing to get that much pace, that much distance on something he's hitting with the outside of his boot? So, those are real inspirations for me. And, I've said on numerous occasions that Cyril Regis was one of my heroes. And if you look at Cyril Regis' game and you look at my game, he came out of non-league football at Hayes the same as I did. And so I always watched Cyril and I thought, that's who I want to model my game on. I saw his power, I saw his pace, and I saw his ability to score goals left, right, headed, and I went, that's who I need to be. And if I have half the career that Cyril's had, then I think I've done well in the game. And so, he was one of my big heroes as a player growing up, and I used to watch him, I used to idolise him, and I always say those guys were the Trailblazers for us. I didn't encounter half of what Cyril, Laurie, Brendan, Clyde Best, even Bob Hazel here at QPR, I didn't encounter half of what those guys encountered. Paul Canaver at Chelsea. These guys were the Trailblazers for us. And
Clyde Best probably beyond any of them, because he's playing late 60s in a very high profile West Ham side at a time when that National Front thing is just beginning to rise and dominate. I mean, I can't speak about it at all, but from what I've learned, what I've been told.
Yeah. And so, Clyde Best, and, I had the pleasure of meeting Clyde Best, and it really was a pleasure. Not listening to some of the things that he had to go through, but just knowing that these people have, blazed a trail for you to follow in a path. I always bow my head and tilt my cap to these guys, because what they went through. I know I've gone to Turkey and and I've gone to different places and I've done different things and I've gone into racist environments, but it's never been as harsh as what those guys suffered.
Looking back, could you have coped if that had been your generation? I have a suspicion, but it's your life.
I'd like to think I would have been able to cope with it as well as them, because as well, what people have to remember is the reactions, because they wasn't only getting it from the supporters, they were getting it from people on the pitch as well. You see people flip now for the most innocuous things, but to imagine someone hurling racial abuse at you on the pitch as well, and being able to keep your dignity and your calmness to be able to go out and play the game that you need to play, to score the goals that you need to score, to make sure that your team win. And that's the part of Cyril Regis that people, Laurie Cunningham, Brendan Betson, that people don't often talk about what a great player was, but to overcome
restraint, self-restraint.
Yes, self-restraint.
Yeah. So their restraint maybe was just purely professional.
Yeah.
No matter that you're being faced with evil, and not too few people use that word.
Yeah.
When it comes to racism, it's just it's evil that you're facing. Yeah. You can't allow them to dominate you by you're sent off every third game, and then you don't have a career.
Exactly. And so the restraint that they must have shown, or did show, not must have, show, to have the careers that they had is somewhat immeasurable. And you sit here sometimes and I think, wow, because I see some of the things that's going on in Europe at the moment. Some of the black players going to Europe and stuff that they encounter, and I think, wow, it's nothing compared to what the likes of those guys had.
But it isn't getting better, is it? I thought there was a while whereby it had not been eradicated, but it felt like there had been so much handed down through generations of a change in culture that we were beginning to, if not eradicate it, make it a demonised evil that people could point to anybody who behaved or spoke that way as being automatically, you're in a minority, it's, you're in the wrong, and we will show you that. And now, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, looking back from a distance, it feels as if we've lost ground. It feels as if it's on the rise. Yeah. What's your attitude to that, your beliefs in that?
I think my beliefs in it, I think if you go to most Premier League games, much better, because you're now seeing a mixture of cultures at games.
In the crowd?
In the crowd, that's acceptable. But you go into some of these Eastern European places where they don't see black people. Mm-hmm. And you're just facing the same things that we had in this country 20, 30 years ago. lack of education, and I don't think the authorities act in the manner that they should to eradicate it. I think a lot more can be done. And I always say, if you want to eradicate something from anywhere, if you go to the most extreme measures, then you eradicate it. Mm-hmm. You know, when we were kicked out of Europe for hooliganism, for that period of time, what did we have to do to get ourselves back into Europe? They took the strongest measure they could against British football and said, right, you're not playing in Europe anymore. We learned how to behave ourselves. So,
including the clubs that hadn't been involved that night, including the administration, which everybody, irrespective of their part on that given night, had to change, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think when we go to FIFA and UEFA and say, right, we know that we hear chanting from this team in this certain competition, I tell you what, if they was to say, right, okay, you no longer play in this competition, not that you're playing behind closed doors, you're no longer playing in this competition, you're kicked out of this competition, you'll eradicate it. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. You would eradicate if you wanted to. But that's going to the extreme.
This is your big interview, this is yours, so... And I'm taking that as a positive and intelligent stance, and as an example of how it worked. Is it probably not likely that to get authority bodies making those decisions, there have to be people who understand it, black or ethnic minority people in the Blazers, saying, well, I see that incident as something that we've seen before, that we're trying to eradicate, and here's the big decision. You've been warned, you've been fined, and here's the big one now. Because it's impossible to understand why those in authority don't think like you or want to act like you now.
Yeah, because they don't feel it, because they don't understand it. And you're right. You know, we've been speaking about it for a long time now in the Premier League. It's funny because I saw Martin Glenn, who's high up in the FA, and talk about the new procedures behind BME representation at England level, and. Someone asked me the other day, is this lip service or is this a genuine move towards trying to eradicate this, this stuff in this BME stuff in terms of getting more people into the boardroom, getting people into administrative positions, more black managers, and I said, well, lip service. Okay, let me explain something to you. In the time of saying that they're going to interview a BME candidate for the next England post when it becomes available, but that person has to have a pro licence, have to have coached at the highest level in the Premier League. I said, so what that tells me that they're only going to interview Chris Hughton, because there's no other black manager who has those credentials. So yes, it is lip service, because they know that. So if they know that, and you're going to come out and say, well, this is the criteria you need to get the job, there's only Chris Hughton that they're going to be able to interview.
So I'm scared of making a fool of myself by saying things that, sound glib. But I'll ask you a straight question. For as little as I understand of the Rooney Rule, which in principle, when you read it and try to understand it, it looks as if it makes sense. It's come from the NFL, and in essence it says that it's obligatory that there must always be black or ethnic minority candidates when senior jobs in administration or management or governance come up. And I think we're grown-ups around this table. We know that you can't govern the mind processes of people making the decisions in the first place. But does it make sense if that becomes not just the norm, but the law here in our football, in this football, that gradually people who are either complacent or casually racist or don't even know that they're making racist decisions, when they get an opportunity to speak to somebody who's been put on a list because it's obligatory, and then they look and go, oh, that's the right candidate. Is it? Am I being too simplistic, or is there a possibility that gradually the gates of opportunity are opened that way?
Well, I don't think you're being simplistic. I think you're being. It's pretty clear that is the way forward, because if you look at how the Rooney Rule came to existence and the way it transformed what they were doing in NFL was because of that same reason, that they gave someone an opportunity to interview, and he may not have got the job. But the next owner of this franchise talking to the next owner of the franchise, well, bloody hell, I interviewed, blah, blah. And I tell you what, I was really impressed with him. He's worth interviewing. So all of a sudden, you're getting through to an interviewing process. At the moment, the whole problem is we're not even getting to an interviewing process because, especially in the Premier League, the club know their next managers before they've sacked the one they've got, 9 times out of 10. So there's no interviewing process. But if you make it obligatory that you have to, then you may get a candidate come through the door and he may be that impressive. You know, I remember sitting down with Daniel Levy and talking about one of the managers that he interviewed for one of the jobs at Tottenham. And it's not probably right to say his name, but he interviewed him and he said, when I looked at his presentation, he said, at the time I wasn't thinking I was going to give him the job, but when I looked at his presentation and the way he spoke to me, he said to me, he sacked him, and then he said to me afterwards, he said, I've got to be honest, if he came in with the same presentation and the way he spoke to me, I'd probably give him the job again. Do you know what I mean? He was that impressive. And so what we're talking about is just getting an opportunity to come through the door and being able to sit down and have a conversation and say, well, this is my ideas. This is what I think I can do for your football club. You may not get the job, but it just gives you an opportunity to put your case forward.
If we go back to when I remember, although not growing up in a community where there were a lot of people from different cultures, different coloured skins. It just was where I grew up. It wasn't. So therefore, when I first heard people talking about Viv Anderson as he broke through and made his England debut, and I heard some of the things that people said on television, which they weren't intended to be a put down, but they were ridiculous. Wait till the winter comes, muddy pitch, whatever. And from that to now, talent has meant that when you're buying footballers, colour has no bias, only about the search for talent is so hungry that you sign whoever's got the ability. With that diffusion of successful black footballers, how is it even possible that in that merry-go-round where you always kind of know, why aren't people stepping off and saying, well, this fella has got exactly the same CV, background, I saw in him, these words that you say about the white footballers, I saw in him on the training ground when he was only 27, the ability to lead and teach. What different about black players?
I always think when you look at the interviewing process, people say to me, you've made it into the boardroom. I said, yeah, but my owners are from an ethnic minority background. And I said, and look, when you look at places like the FA, and you look at well-established establishments where these guys work, let's go a generation from them, and their families were being served by black people, their families were being served by Indian people. So you're not going to change their mindset. They don't see you on the same level as them. My kids coming through, your kids coming through, my kids' kids coming through.
They don't see colour.
They don't see colour.
Yeah, exactly.
When my son comes home with his friends, they're Indian, they're Chinese, they're white, they're black. Yeah. There's a mixture of friends that he comes, and they all go out together. They will change the mindsets of the people that go into the next boardrooms. I ain't going to be able to do it, unfortunately. I can do my part, what I do now, and hopefully show people that there is an opportunity. And I think a lot of with the role that I'm playing at the moment, a lot of footballers come out of football and think, I don't know the academia side of what goes on in this part when you come across the other side of the wall. But I say, but the people that are the CEOs and chairman and all that, they have the owners, they have expertise in other businesses, and most of them are university educated.
Probably
95%, 98% of footballers don't come from a university background, they come from working class families. So we struggle a little bit with the academia, but we can learn that. But what those people can't learn is what we did out on the football pitch.
Nailed it.
And so we shouldn't be frightened to want to say, right, we're going back into education to educate ourselves, because listen, I don't know everything I needed to know about contracts and everything when I came in, but I'm learning very quickly. And that's where, I think some footballers will come out and say, right, I want to go into that administrative side.
Recently with Brewster at Liverpool, who did a brilliant interview with The Guardian, and it seems to me that the FA is where the focal point of change needs to happen, and they don't want to change, so we're stuck in this cycle about, no, we're doing the best we can and all that. It's would you go there in the right circumstances? If there comes a time when they go, okay, we accept that we have to change and we can't change it ourselves, would that attract you? Have you got the desire to be the guy who sets new standards from within, not from within the game, but from within the FA?
If I could help, without a shadow of a doubt. because you know, a lot of the things that go on is like you said, you know, the Aluko case. It's only because of miseducation and misunderstanding. You know, who's doing the process of the due diligence on what happened? How does that person feel to what's happened? How do they know how Aluko felt? Just making it up as they go along, and then realising at the end of it, oh well, we've done this wrong, so now we have to make changes.
I'm not here enough, and I'm also not smart enough to know whether we're actually at a moment of change. But it feels like we could be at a pivotal moment. You know, one of the things that excites me a lot. You have talked a great deal before and here about seeing Brendan Batson and Laurie and Cyril. And for a long time, England football teams can't play football. And now, double world champions, runners up at European Championship level, there's a generation coming through who know how to pass and they're technical and they've won tournaments and things that England players have been good enough to do.
I haven't done in the past.
And if you look at the makeup of that team, 70% ethnic minorities that are different from, you know, kids that maybe you grew up with in your day, or I grew up with and that is setting a chain of there's a little Les Ferdinand sitting watching that team, you know, that took Spain apart in the World Cup final, thinking, boy, that's me.
Yeah. And it's funny though, because I think it was 56% BME representation on the pitch, but when you pan to the bench, there wasn't one.
I didn't know that.
There wasn't one in both teams. There wasn't any BME candidate.
In terms of coaching, you're talking about
coaching.
I see.
Physio. You know, because it's, you know, when you look at a bench, it's not always just the coaches on. There's a group, there's a team, there's the doctor, there's the physio, there's all sorts of people on that bench. And when you pan to the bench of all them celebrating, there was no one of a BME.
Same old.
Exactly.
It's going to change. I'm glad that you might be part of it. We can't stop, and I have no intention of stopping until you specifically say stop. And probably if you say it in Turkish, at that point I might stop. We need to talk about one of the areas of your life that was fun and successful, and it's Newcastle. And the obvious thing to ask you about Newcastle is either saxophones or helicopters or motorbikes. I've been in a helicopter now and again for work, and it's extraordinary. What the hell were you doing in a helicopter as probably as a Newcastle player?
Yes.
Did you have a little clause in your contract to say a helicopter's fine, no problem at all, or not, or just try and explain that a little bit.
Okay, so how do I explain it? I was told in your
you're supposed to know.
In your contract it says you're not allowed to do any dangerous sport.
Already, I think you've won this argument. Okay. Yeah, the lawyers at Newcastle needed to make that a bit broader, right?
So when I went to Spurs, in the summer I used to ride my motorbike. I learned how to ride a motorbike at Newcastle, and David Pleat once said to me, "Do you realise in your contract it says no dangerous sport?" I said, "Yeah, no, I understand that." He said, "But you ride a motorbike." I don't ride it for sport. I said, "I ride it to get from A to B." All right, Mr. Ferdinand. Okay, Mr. Ferdinand. Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. I said, "Well, I don't really." He said, "No dangerous sports," and I said, "I don't ride it around the track."
Open and shut case, you've won it. You could have been a lawyer. You could have been a QC.
So the same applied to the helicopter, and basically, it was Keegan's. It wasn't his idea to fly helicopters, but what he said to me, he said, "Look."
It was definitely feasible. You could have sold it. I bet Kevin, and I admire him, but he's got that character. It could have been.
Well, he was the one who allowed me to learn how to ride a motorbike. Because when I went there, he said to me, "Look, you know, in London you can get lost. You know, you can go out and you can go different parts of London, and people won't bother you."
Yeah.
He said,
Newcastle.
"You come to Newcastle as the number 9." He said, "Everywhere you go, you're going to get bothered." And I was like, okay. He said, "This is a goal for bowling." He said, "I'm telling you this because this is exactly what it is. And so I don't want you to come up here and go, I didn't expect this and I didn't expect that. This is exactly what it is." So he said, "Is there anything that you want to do? Is there anything you want to learn? Is there anything you want to do?" So I said, "Yeah, there's a couple of things really." So he said, "Well, have a think about it and come back to me." So I went back and I said, "Right, I want to learn how to cook properly. I want to learn how to play the saxophone, ride a motorbike, And that was it. Those were they were the three things. And he went, well, certainly with the cooking and saxophone, we can help. And he went, riding a motorbike. He went, I'm not sure if we can help with that one. I went, well, you asked me what I wanted to do. And he went, okay. And he said, I think one of the motorbike, Harley Davidson place up there had made him a motorbike. And he went, I'll tell you what, I'll allow you to do your test if you ride the motorbike they've made for me back to my house. Well, it'll be a pleasure. Right,
it's a deal.
So that was a deal.
So this is the full hog. Is it with a low seat and high handlebars?
Yeah, I never got to ride it. I never got to ride his bike, but I passed my test up there while I was up there. Yeah, I learned how to cook, and at the time I said to him, oh, but the cooking part's no problem, I'll go to night school. He went, no you won't. I went, yeah, well, I said, I'll find somewhere, and he go, you won't go to night school. I said, I will. He said, Les, I've told you the reason why we're doing this is because you'll get mithered. He said, can you imagine going to night school to learn how to cook? He said, it just won't happen. I said, and I was quite naive to it. I was going, what are you talking about? He went, the people will not stop bothering you.
You'd never have a chap any vegetables. You'd be like, all right, listen, what about here? Yes, chef.
So what happened was, Sir John Hall had a chef, a butler called Issa, and he said to me, look, we'll arrange a couple of days a week where you come over and I'll teach you how to cook some nice dishes. So that's what I did. I used to go over to Sir John's house, and I'd learn with Issa how to cook.
Fantastic.
And then I went into learning how to play the saxophone. Which
I think we're more Clarence Clements, are we? More Springsteen than, not Kenny G. We're not talking about tenor sax. We're talking about big, full-on
sax.
I feel stupid. I even asked that question.
So I started to learn, and guy used to come to my house, and I kind of learned how to play the sax, and then obviously the motorbike, and then in between that, I got a call from a guy saying, Les, would you like to learn how to fly a helicopter? And at first I was like, yeah, I think I would.
Was it about that short a decision time at the time at all?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah,
Had you been in one at that stage?
No, I hadn't. And I remember going to the airfield and the fella saying to me, we're going to go up in this and you're going to either love it or you're going to hate it. And I always remember going up. I'd actually come back to London, and I went for a flight out of Elstree.
Where the film studios were?
Yeah. And a fella said to me, you're going to either love it or hate it when we do this. And because he'd come down to London, I'd come back to London for the summer, and he said, you love it all. So anyway, I jumped up, we went up, and when I first got in, it was this little two-seater, Robinson R22, this little two-seater thing, and I was thinking, I was expecting this big, massive sort of like helicopter.
Chinook or something like that, yeah.
Little tiny two-seater thing. So we went up, and we started flying, and I was like, wow, this don't feel that safe, this don't feel that great, you know what I mean? And he said to me, you love it, hate it, and I was thinking, I'm starting to hate this a little bit, do you know what I mean? So he went to me, where do you live, Les? And I went, and at the time I lived in a place called Arkley, which is literally by air 2 minutes from Elstree.
Right.
So he said, whereabouts? I said, I live just up over there. So it flew over my house. I saw my house, and once I saw my house, that was it. Boom, I was done. I was like, I'm fine. And we started flying around, and he said, you take control. And straight away, he gave me control, and like I was a little bit but like kind of like liked it. And so we flew around a little bit, saw some other bits and pieces that I knew, and then boom, landed back at Elstree.
You didn't land it first time, did you?
No. He landed back at Elstree, and then we went through some bits and pieces, and he said, what do you think? I said, yeah, I want to do this. and ended up sort of like doing it.
Is it complicated?
Secretly. Yeah, it is.
Well, helicopters are not very secret. They're quite noisy, they're quite big, they're quite noticeable.
Yeah, but what I mean is secretly...
So Newcastle Not even Kevin?
No one knew about it.
There must have been a play you.
Absolutely no one knew about it at the time. I used to take myself off in the afternoons, and I'd have a lesson until I got to a point
was
where...
part of the thrill, the sort of guilty pleasure of like...
Yeah, no one knows. Yeah, it was like, apart from my girlfriend and stuff, no one else knew, and I was like, I'm doing it. Why are you doing that? Anyway, I used to take myself off in the afternoons, and then I'd fly, and I said to the guy, how long does it normally take to... And I think you need to do 60 hours. But most people do 75, 80 hours and stuff like that, unless you can put a load of time into it and go consistently. over a period. And then I moved back to Tottenham. I left Newcastle, moved back to Tottenham, and I was in the midst of doing it, so I carried on. And so there was some afternoons where I'd go, right, training's finished, and I'd say to the geezer, right, I'll be there at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, and I'd jump in the car, and like, where you off to? Les? Oh, I've got to go. So I'd zoom off, and I'd get halfway down the road, and the fellow would phone and say, oh, Les, the weather conditions today, mate. I said, well, it's all right. He'd go, no, it's coming in, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, eventually I did my test, part of the test, yeah. And it's really funny because what happens is when you go to do your helicopter licence, the first exam you take is air law.
Okay.
So you learn about the different zones that you can fly in and all that, and the etiquette of the radio and everything else. And so you learn about air and
the kind of thing that these drones are affecting now, because drones aren't, nobody earns air law with drones, and they go into places they shouldn't be.
Exactly. So you learn about air law, and you cannot fly solo until you learn air law.
Okay,
right, which makes sense. Yeah. So anyway, that was my first exam I did. So I did my air law exam. And then I was able to do circuits and stuff on my own, and you fly around, and I was loving it. So me being up in this helicopter on my own, just doing circuits and coming and landing, taking off again, doing circuits and all that. So I'd gone about 6 months of doing this. So then one of the women that worked at Cab Air, it was, she turned around and she said to me, Les, do you know that you got all your other exams to do? And I went, yeah. She goes, well, you got 7 other exams to do, Les, and you're running out of time. So I went, what do you mean I'm running out of time? She says, well, do you know that after you take your first exam, you've got 12 months to complete the rest of them? So this girl, who's a really good friend of mine now, her name's Kat, and she flies for Virgin now. She took me on meteorology. That was the next exam I did with her, meteorology. And when I did that, she went, why haven't you done all the other exams? So I went, well, I got a little bit excited about going out on solos and all that. And she went, Les, you got to have these done by, I had something like 4 months to go. So she goes, right, I'm going to work with you, we'll get you through them. And then she went, boom, every other week we were doing another exam. Like,
law, meteorology.
Human performance, helicopter tech.
What is human performance?
Human performance is basically talks to you about. So for instance, when you're in an aeroplane and you turn left or you turn right, and you feel the sensation. Yeah. The actual sensation is coming from the hairs in your nose.
No way.
Yeah, exactly, and stuff like that. And it's just like you think it's you. Do
you think she might have been pulling the wool over your eyes? No, because that's not even credible, man.
This is in the books. So you work off the books and all that. So human performance and sort of like the fatigue signs that you need to look for, and all the different bits and pieces that can affect your flying as a human being. So you do that, to do obviously navigation, radio telephony. So there was all these other exams that you had to do. So there were 7 exams.
You pushed aside while you were
so I was and then all of a sudden I had a right panic up because I had to get them done, and fortunately I got them all done within. So and all it is if you don't get it done within the year. So for instance, I had to, if I hadn't done it all in that year, then all I would had to have done is air law again. And then, whatever ones I hadn't done in a 12
What's the furthest
process.
you've gone, or what's the furthest you can go, or what's the furthest you feel safe going?
To be honest, when I left Tottenham, I went to West Ham, had a bit of Leicester, and then I joined. Sam persuaded me to join Bolton.
Yeah. All right.
I used to fly to Bolton in the morning.
From here?
From Elstree. Right, so on a Monday morning I'd fly to...
That's a long way.
I used to fly into Bolton. It used to take me about an hour and a half.
Until this minute, I didn't actually know that you could be up in a helicopter. I didn't know about fuel capacity.
Yeah, so it takes...
You got Elstree, Bolton.
Yeah. So what would normally be like a 3 and a bit hour drive, 4 hour drive, used to take me an hour and a half in a helicopter. I used to land at a place called Barton. Right. And I'd get... Because I wouldn't go back and forth every day. So I'd go on a Monday, stay in Bolton till whenever Sam said, look, go back home. If we were playing in London, because there was lots of games in London back then, he'd say, right, go home on Wednesday night and we'll see you in London.
See you down there.
See you in the hotel on Friday.
Yeah.
Because
And he knew about this, at least.
Yeah, he knew about it, yeah. So I used to fly into...
The way you explain it makes sense.
Yeah. And so it just made it so easy for me. And I remember when I in the midst of being at Bolton, I was halfway through the season, and I said to Sam, you know, you persuaded me to play for another year. I was 38. I was going at my 39th year, and I said to him, "You've persuaded me to play for another year. I want to play." He went, "Les, what are you talking about?" He said, "Like, you're going to play." He says, "Like, you know." At the time, Kevin Davis had the best year he'd had at Bolton, and he said, "Look, Kevin's going to start, but you're going to play games. You scored more goals than Kevin last year. You're going to play." But that was the year they finished in Europe, so they got off to a fantastic.
Fernando Hierro played?
Yeah, Fernando Hierro. I played with Fernando.
Big old Ivan Campo.
And
wow.
Yeah, so JJ Kocher and stuff like that. You know?
That was a team you were in, eh?
And so I was like, I got to around about the Christmas time, and obviously they got off to a flying start, so I was coming off the bench every now and again. And well, at the beginning I was coming off all the time, and then as things got a bit tight, I was finding that one. So I pulled Sam just towards Christmas time, and I said, "Sam, look, you know, I know this is my last year, and if it's going to be my last year, I want to play." And he went, "You're 39 years of age. You're earning good money. You're coming on." I said, "No. I said, I don't want to sit on your bench and earn good money. I want to play, and if I can't play, I'd rather not play at all." So he went to me, "Look, a couple of teams have come in to take you on loan." He said, "But I want to keep you because you'll play a lot more in the second half of the season." And I said, "Look, let me have a think about it. But, you know, if this is going to be my last year, I want to try and play as many games as I can." So then he said to me, like, QPR, Reading, and he said, "I know you probably want to get back down to London." So anyway, we couldn't do the deal for me to come to QPR, so I ended up going to Reading. So when I got to Reading, got in the change rooms, and we, you know, trained a few days and all that, and then one of the boys went to me, "Liz, you got a helicopter?"
I wish I could portray the face like just under the front going, the face is, "I've got something quite strange to ask you here."
He went, "Liz, I understand you got a helicopter." I said, yeah, I have. He said, "So, what do you do?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "So, when you want to go somewhere, what do? You call up the pilot and you say, 'Look, I want to go blah, blah, blah,' and then he meets you and you go." I said, No. When I want to go somewhere, I phone up the flying school and say, 'Can you get my helicopter ready, please?'" And he went, "Don't be stupid." So he went to me, "Don't be stupid." I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "You don't fly it." I went, "Of course I fly it." So he went, No, I'm not having that, Les. You wouldn't believe me. So we played on the Saturday, and we had a game on the Tuesday. So we were coming in on the Sunday for a warm down. So I said to Stevie Coppell, I said, "Steve, look, you don't fly a helicopter." He went, "Yeah." I said, "The lads don't believe me." So I said, "Can I fly in on Sunday?" And he said, I said, "If there's no games, you're flying on Sunday." So he went, "Oh, that'd be brilliant. Let's give us a bit of lift and all that, you know." So he said, "But look, don't fly in." He said, "I'll get the lads out. How long will it take you?" And I live in St Albans,
right?
So
nice.
If I drove to Reading, it used to take me an hour because I had to go through all the back roads and blah blah blah. It took me less than 20 minutes in the helicopter, right? So anyway, I flew over and I got to, and I had my own helicopter at the time. I had it in blue and white, and so I get close to the training ground. He's got the boys out and they're about to do the warm-up and they're probably thinking, "Where's Les?" Like, you know what I mean? So I land on the training pitch, like, you know what I mean? And none of them could believe it. Well, a few of them knew that I'd flown, but most of the lads didn't believe that I flew it myself. But I obviously had no one alongside me. It was just me on my own. And it was like, I mean,
It takes a man of some stature and imagination and ambition to do that.
Yeah.
I bet you had so much fun. I bet it was a stress relief.
Oh, do you know what?
Driving.
You get up there at times, and you know, I remember flying to when the cup finals used to be at Cardiff. I remember going there one day, flying into Celtic Manor, and watched the game. And then I remember one of the helicopter pilots there saying to me, "Les, you've flown in today, haven't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Look, you better keep an eye on the weather. The weather's coming in." And I was like, "Okay." So he said, "So just be careful going back to Elstree." He said, "There's some big storms coming." I said, "Okay." So I checked the weather, and there was a few storms coming. So anyway, I get in the helicopter, and I always remember Jamie Redknapp and Jeff Reed from Sky. I was going, "Les, we're going to be okay?" And I was going, "Yeah, it's absolutely okay." So anyway, I get in the helicopter, we take off, and I go across the water. I get down to Bryce Norton, and I could see the weather. And the great thing about the helicopter is, from a distance, you can see the weather.
Super visibility.
You can see the weather coming in. And I went, "Chaps, that looks a bit nasty." So they was going, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, look, the instructor that I passed my test with, he always said to me, the great thing about helicopters is when the weather comes in, if it looks too bad, just put it down on the deck.
Just stop.
Just stop and put it down on the deck and let the weather go through, and you can always take off. I said most accidents happen when people try to plough through what's coming through. So I remember came through. We got to Bryce Norton, and I called up Elstree, and I said, Elstree, you know, give them a call sign. I said, look, I'm coming back from Cardiff, and what's the weather like? They went, Les, wherever you are right now, put the helicopter down. He said that you got some bad weather coming in. We had some people who left earlier than what you've left, and they were going on to. They were going on a bit further, but they had to drop down in Elstree and stop for a while. So he said, where are you? I said, I'm right near Bryce Norton. And they went, well, probably won't let you in because it's a military base. Yeah. And so I said, okay. So I said, look, I'm going to try him. So I called up Bryce Norton and said, look, weather's coming in. I'm on my way back to Elstree, blah, blah, blah. It was brilliant. They went, yeah, coming. So
Did you say who it was?
No, I didn't. I just said, I'll give them a call sign and come in and said, I told them exactly what had happened. And they went, yeah, we've had a few. Go past and the weather's coming in, yeah, please drop in. And so we dropped in, and all of a sudden we're surrounded by all these guys with guns and all that, like, you know what I mean, making sure we are who we were.
But they're all going out. Literally they were
they was like, they'd check who we were, they just, they come out and with the rifles and all that, and they're standing there making sure who we were who we were and stuff. And so we get out the helicopter, and because it's an American base as well.
So, I didn't know that. So it's ultra serious in that case.
So anyway, we landed in there, and I said to him, look, we're going to have to get a taxi from here. So we get a taxi from Bryce Norton back home and leave. I left the helicopter.
Left it there?
Yeah, because the weather was that bad.
You weren't getting up again that night?
When I went in and spoke to their controllers, the weather people, they said, look, you ain't getting back home tonight. So I just jumped in the taxi and went home.
When this podcast series finally takes off, I had other objectives, but now it's a bumper Graham helicopter. I have to finish, I take another drink or kick us out. That's my challenge.
No problems, mate, no problems.
Because I'm not going to ask you about, you made me laugh a lot now, but you understand football, and you've been a first-hand participant in something that I think I'm seeing again. So unless you watch a lot of Real Madrid, I'm not going to draw you necessarily on Real Madrid right now, but when Zinedine Zidane takes over 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, he comes into a squad of extraordinary talents who are just a little bit underperforming daily and in matches. And the fit between them and Rafa Benitez has been uncomfortable, and they've just shrugged their shoulders a little bit, shrugged him off, and Zidane comes in. And all that's really needed, because these guys are not only fabulous talents, but almost to a man, they're born competitors. Most of them have got that mix of character and talent. So, despite the history of Real Madrid, Zidane is the winningest coach in 2 years that there's ever been. He makes them European champions and Spanish champions at the same time for the first time since 1958.
Wow.
No, you don't think that of Real Madrid. You think Spanish champions all the time, European champions. So he's done historic things, including back-to-back Champions League, which, Lippi couldn't manage, Ferguson couldn't manage. And right now it's gone tits up. You look at it right now and they're a little bit hapless. They've won 3 trophies already this season. That's how mad life is at Real Madrid. The world, the 2 Super Cups. But they're a historic distance behind Barcelona. They've never been so far behind Barcelona in their entire history. And I don't know. I look at what you experienced with Zidane is in his 2nd full year of coaching. So it's understandable that he doesn't have all the answers.
No.
You can't, no matter how well you played. Maybe he's going to be a terrific coach or manager. But he's cutting his teeth at Real Madrid after winning 8 trophies, because the fit between him going, right lads, this is what training's going to be like. They all go, yeah, I'm up for this. And suddenly you unleash the power. I look at Newcastle, I look at Kevin. I look at Kevin Keegan, who radiates enthusiasm. Who is something equivalent in English terms to Zidane in terms of what he achieved at Liverpool, went to Hamburg, European footballer, Ballon d'Or of its type. Yet there was a moment. People always talk about the explosive interview after Leeds and they mock him for it. But there's a moment when Newcastle were just everybody's darling because it was beautiful to watch. Without saying player for player, the way that Newcastle played and were regarded, and the way that Real Madrid played under Zidane and were regarded, I think are similar. And right now, Zidane isn't sure quite what's going on or how to cure it. And there was a spot at that time when you didn't win the title that I think everybody outside Salford wanted you to. And Kevin couldn't quite manage it. What was the day and night comparison in your manager from the first 7 months or first however many months that you get there and it's pure joy and he gets everything right, to him not quite knowing what's gone wrong or how to fix it?
Right, okay. I think there's two things here. When things started to go wrong for us, what happened? We perhaps had only one person in that changing room that ever won anything in his career, in Peter Beardsley.
Pedro, yeah.
Nobody else knew what it took to get across that finishing line. So when we lost the first 3 points, we were 12 points clear with a game in hand. When we lost the first game, we were still 9 points clear with a game in hand. So the attitude of the players in the dressing room was, we're still 9 points clear with a game in hand. So if we win that game in hand, which we expected to do, we'll be 12 points clear again. Rather than that, hey, listen here, we've just lost 3 points here. We've got to make sure this don't happen again. There was a bit of a complacency in the changing rooms amongst the players in losing those first 3 points, that it didn't matter. We were going to win our game in hand. That was going to put us 12 points clear, and we were just going to carry on doing that. I think, like Man City had just lost to Liverpool, I think the reaction in the changing room will be very different to what ours was. They'll be hurt by it. We wasn't hurt by losing that 3 points. We were more, it's to be expected, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, I think that hurt us more than anything else, because then we went on a run where we just couldn't get out of that mindset that everything will be all right, everything could be all right. And then obviously, I think Liverpool, the Liverpool 4-3 was the infamous game for us. I think had we won that, that would probably kick-started us back to getting to where we needed to be. We just never did, because we went after that game and we lost Arsenal, Liverpool, and then we lost to Blackburn. And that, it was just now a game in hand. You know, and I think with Zinedine, and this is only my own personal opinion, most of the top managers, when their teams win, they still change it.
Yes. Just keep everyone in the toes.
Whereas I don't think he's changed too much. And sometimes the complacency of having won those trophies, what's there to go for? But, you know, you look at Alex Ferguson through his time at Manchester United, they'd win things. And then all of a sudden he said the first thing he used to do is look around at who was ready to win something again next season. And if you weren't ready, he just went, see ya, and he brought someone else in. And that gave him the impetus to go on and win. And so everyone was always on their toes, because they knew he'd get rid of you at any time. And I don't think that's the same. And that could just be the naivety of, you know, him coming into his first big job.
It is.
And understanding that. And, you know, the thing about, you know, it being his first big job, I know he's been at the club for quite a while now before he took the reins.
Correct.
As manager. That, for me, is the difference. You know, Keegan, as he said, he was effervescent. He was everything we needed him to be for 7 months.
When the going was good, it was fun.
It was brilliant. When the game was good, it was brilliant.
What was daily life like on the training ground?
You know what? We would train on I tell this story a lot to people who ask me what it was like. We would train on a Friday at the time. You know, right at the beginning of the season, up to we started losing games. But we would train on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning before the game on the Saturday. And I used to think to myself, bloody hell, whoever we're playing against tomorrow is going to get an absolute hiding, because the ball would be... The one thing Kevin always demanded of his teams was you trained at match tempo. So wherever you went, whatever time you trained, you was at it. So sometimes the training was like the ball was just going bang, 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 1 and 2 touch, bang, 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 bang. And you used to think on a Friday we used to have these round robin games. And you used to think...
So 5v5, 5 waiting, and then in, off, on, non-stop.
And the ball would
tackles?
Just be, tackles, everything. Yeah, everything. Yeah,
Nothing held back.
Everything was at match tempo. So, you know, David Batty used to kick people in training, but no one complained about it because he kicked people in games. You know, so the ball would be zipping about, and it was great to be part of. You know, and as you said, I think outside of Salford, we was everybody's second favourite team.
It was stunning to watch.
Yeah.
It was fabulous to watch.
And then as well, I think, when you look back on it, I had 21 goals by Christmas and I only scored 8 the second half of the season. So that in itself tells you that, I lost form. Rob Lee, who'd been absolutely brilliant for us, he lost. There was too many.
Gillespie got injured.
Gillespie got injured on the right hand side, and what happened was Keegan played Peter out there, brought Asprilla into the side. Tried to play Peter out on the right, but Peter was always going to drift back in there. So, I always remember playing in that infamous game against Liverpool. I always remember Paul Ince saying we knew that David Ginola was going to keep going, and at some stage we were going to get John Beresford 1-on-1 with Steve McManaman, or 2-on-1 down that side, because David wouldn't do the backtracking. Then you had that down the other side as well, because now no longer was Keith Gillespie there. Pete was coming.
You got Peter, but he's coming in to play 10 in behind the striking.
So then you had that down both sides. So it was all those little things but we only knew how to play football one way, and that was you score 1, we're going to try and score 2. You score 2, we're going to try and score 3. And in the end, that was the. It's
the Real Madrid way as well. Zidane has said in public and says to his front foot, boss the game. Don't actually want to ship in 2 or 3, but we'll score 4 or 5 or 6, whatever. When you're playing that, when you're watching it, it's going well, isn't it?
As a centre forward, it's the best thing that can happen to you, because you know that chances are going to come. And you wear the number 9 at Newcastle, there's a big responsibility with that shirt. But you had so many good players about you contributing with goals and stuff like that as well. That I remember we went to play against Everton. Keegan called me to the front of the coach. So I went to the front of the coach and he said, when I used to come and watch you at QPR? I said, yeah. He said, there were times where you'd pick the ball up on the halfway line and you'd just surge and you'd run with it. He said, I've seen you score goals off the end of it. Why don't you do it anymore? And I went, well, because when the ball comes into me now, I feel like I've got so many options that if I was to turn and run with it and lose it, I feel I'm doing a discredit to the rest of my players. I said, I feel like I've got so many options. And I said, that's no disrespect to the players at QPR. I just feel the way we play on the front foot, every time the ball comes in, I've got so many options to lay the ball off. I always remember he said to me, well, I want you to get back to doing that. So I said, okay. He said, but maybe not today, because he said, we've never had much luck here at Goodison Park. And I went to him, I don't lose here. Like that. And I scored my 100th goal in league football at Goodison Park. Picked it up on a halfway lane, turned around and smacked it in the bottom corner.
There you go, boss.
And he looked around at me and he was like that. And then we ended up winning the game 3-1. And I said, I know what the reason is. When I was a player here, I played against Everton in the game, and I got into a bit of a tussle with one of the players, and then I got some racist mail here sent to me. When I opened it up, it was all swastikas and stuff like that and all that. And so it kind of like gave me the impetus to. And if you look at my record against Everton, I've scored more goals against Everton than any other team I've played against.
You're up for it.
And I used to say to people, if I only scored 2 goals in a season, it'd be home and away at home to Everton and away against Everton, And I've now since then sort of like met people who are Everton supporters and all that. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys I know, he used to be a season ticket holder. And I went there with Spurs, first game of the season once, and I'd broken my wrist at the back end of one season, and so I had this cast on, and I was probably a couple of weeks behind all the rest of the players in pre-season. And Glenn Hoddle went to me, I've watched you in training, Les, he says, and I know you're a couple of weeks behind everyone. He goes, but you've been on fire. I want to take you. I said, I'm not going to start you. I'll have you on the bench, and I want to bring you on. He goes, so I went, okay. So anyway, as the game's going on and all that, it gets to about 65 minutes, 70 minutes, he goes, Les, you ready? So I went, yeah. So he goes, go and warm up. And I was like, all right. And my mate said he was sitting in the stand and he was going, he scores against us anyway, so what are you booing him now for? He said he was arguing with someone about it, right? And he said, I went on the pitch, and within 5 minutes I'd scored we was like, it was 1-1, and I scored to make it 2-1, and they scored right and left to make it 2-2, and he went to, when I scored, he went to his mate, giving him that stick and see what he does. So I've always had a real good record against I
love the motivation. I love the stick. I'm gonna shut up now by saying that I probably saw the goal that you didn't want to score, because I reported in every United game at my paper, and I ended up in the Camp Nou in that game where they blah, 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 and because of a series of events I went to, that Camp Nou game got me work in Spain, and I live in Spain because of what people thought of my work that day. If you go back one, it's the cup final against Newcastle. Yeah. You go back one, the one that everybody kind of forgets about, first part of the treble. Season comes to a last day showdown between Old Trafford and Highbury.
Oh, mate.
You boys, Spurs, the club you love, have always loved. You're up there with a chance to turn over the treble, stick it up. You know, Andy Cole, why'd you choose Andy Cole? Because Fergie wanted you, and it was easy peasy sliding doors moment. You got to Newcastle, you come back down. Now, the goal you scored that day must stick out to you for actually the technique of it.
Yeah.
And it's Schmeichel.
Exactly, yeah.
Schmeichel at the peak of his career, he's got 3 more games left. This one, that one, and he's about to leave. And you, well, I mean, take it away, but you didn't want to score that day, did you?
I always wanted to score.
Sorry, you didn't want to win that day.
I didn't want to win that day, yeah. Always wanted to score. And then I remember sort of like the ball being played through. And that season there at Spurs, my kind of like season had been up and down, loads of injuries and stuff like that. And it hadn't been what I wanted it to be. You know, I wanted to go there, I wanted to score bags of goals, and it just never really happened. But, you know, I always gave it my all, and I'd been out for a little while. I'd come back, played a couple of games, and here's our last game at Old Trafford. And I've got this ringing in the back of my mind that if we beat Man United at Old Trafford, Arsenal win the league. Can't get any worse for me. So anyway, the game starts, and we're playing, and then all of a sudden the ball goes through, and I see Schmeichel coming out. I think I can lift it over him here. So I lifted it over, it ends up in the man. I'm thinking, that's not a bad goal. That's not a bad goal. But you know what? You can't even celebrate. You know what I mean? And I think it's the first time my own supporters...
sensational goal.
I think it was the first time my own supporters booed me. You know what I mean? I started booing because I scored and we'd gone 1 up, and Arsenal were like... And it was the first time my name had been sung at Highbury as well, because one of my mates was there and he said, your name was being sung at Highbury, like, you know? And I was going... Please score Man United. Please score Man United. Please score Man United. It was just unbelievable. I was thinking, I ain't had the best of times, and then I scored a goal that can win. Oh, that's it. I'm done at Spurs. I'm going to have to leave at the end of this season, like, you know. But you know,
they did. History says that Beckham and Andy Cole got you out of a jam.
Yeah.
A life well spent. Listen, we arrived here, off flights, tired, excited, and now I'm buzzing all over. I've laughed, I've smiled, I've enjoyed it. I said at the beginning that we only talk to people who admire, and anybody listening to this, this tiny fraction of your life, never mind your career, will understand why. That's been a joy. I've got tears in my eyes of laughter. I'm also speaking to a trained helicopter pilot who, if ever I'm in bother, you're the first man I'm going to call.
Oh, no problem.
Les Ferdinand, that was a joy.
A pleasure for me.
Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, mate.
Well, thanks to the Director of Football at QPR, Sir Les Ferdinand, for being such a wonderful guest, such a funny guest, but also to Paul Morrissey and the staff at QPR for helping us arrange this interview. But to you socios for continuing to support us, thank you too. We couldn't, and now, because of the costs, we wouldn't do it without you. Stick with us. We appreciate it.